Assassin's Creed games are known for many things, but do you know what thing they are currently known for the most? It isn't making bad games or fumbling characters. It's wasting the historical settings that could have worked out pretty well. Trust me, some of these settings, if done well, could have cemented them at the same place they were once at. And let me tell you one thing, they are very interesting and will leave you wondering about a big what if for quite some time. So, are you ready? Let's get into it. The biggest reason India feels so wasted is the format Ubisoft chose for it. Assassin's Creed Chronicles India introduced us to Master Assassin Arbaz Mir, and it threw us right into the middle of the massive tensions between the Sikh Empire and the heavily armed East India Company. Narratively, it had all the perfect ingredients for a classic Assassin's Creed story: a fierce local brotherhood, a massive colonial power acting as the Templars, and a country on the brink of absolute war. But because it was developed as a 2.5D platformer, we never actually got to experience that setting properly. Now, don't get me wrong, the Chronicles games have their own charm, but confining a setting this massive to a side-scrolling puzzle platformer meant that the deep political landscape was largely sidelined. We didn't get to walk through crowded, vibrant streets, and we didn't get to witness the true scale of the conflict up close. Instead of a rich, breathing world, we got a beautiful but ultimately flat backdrop. And speaking of those backdrops, let's talk about the architecture. India in the 19th century was an absolute goldmine for parkour. Imagine the density of Unity's Paris combined with the vibrant colors, towering temples, and sprawling places of the Sikh Empire. A 3D stealth sandbox would have allowed us to scale these massive, intricate structures. We could have planned assassinations inside royal courts, and we could have navigated dense, bustling bazaars using crowds for social stealth in a way we haven't really seen since the original games. The setting is still visually incredible even for a 2.5D platformer. The art direction bursts with stunning reds, golds, and deep greens. But a mainline 3D title built on modern technology could have turned it into one of the most breathtaking open worlds in gaming history. But a setting isn't just about beautiful buildings and colonial politics, it is also heavily tied to some of the most important lore in the entire franchise: the Kohinoor, one of the most powerful pieces of Eden ever introduced. In the lore, this artifact is incredibly dangerous and its history is deeply intertwined with both India and the British Crown. So using a plot device of this magnitude to a spin-off game feels almost criminal. And imagine a mainline title where the entire Assassin Templar war over this diamond is played out in its full 3D cinematic glory. We could have seen exactly how the East India Company manipulated local rulers to secure it, and we could have explored Arbaz Mir's character in far greater depth, understanding his motivations and the immense burden of keeping such a dangerous artifact out of Templar hands. It would have connected seamlessly with the wider Assassin's Creed universe while delivering a story that felt completely unique to the Indian Brotherhood. AC Unity did something opposite. From a purely technical and environmental standpoint, late 18th century Paris is an absolute masterclass. Ubisoft gave us a stunning 1:1 scale recreation of revolutionary France. They introduced a dense, fluid parkour system designed specifically for the city's towering architecture, and they filled the streets with massive dynamic crowds that reacted to the brutal violence of the era. It was a setting practically begging for a dark and politically charged narrative, but that's exactly where the game dropped the ball. Despite having one of the most brutal and bloody periods in human history at its fingertips, the narrative largely pushed the French Revolution into the background. Instead of diving deep into the politics, the reign of terror, or the ideological war tearing the country apart, the game focused on a personal tragedy, a Romeo and Juliet style romance between Arnaud Dorian and Elise de la Serre. Now, there's nothing wrong with the personal story, but when you have thousands of NPCs riding in the streets, guillotines dropping in public squares, and history being rewritten right before your eyes, it feels like a massive waste to treat it all as little more than window dressing. The revolution happened around Arnaud, not because of it. And because of that, one of the greatest open worlds Ubisoft has ever built ended up being paired with a story that never fully capitalized on its true potential. The result is a game that remains visually and technically impressive even today, yet still leaves many fans wondering what could have been if the French Revolution itself had been placed at the heart of the narrative. For years, this was the holy grail, the one setting fans begged for more than any other. And with Assassin's Creed Shadows, Ubisoft finally finally tackled the Sengoku period. By giving us two protagonists, they found a way to bridge one of the biggest divides in the franchise. They physically separated the franchise's two identities. We had Naoe, a shinobi who brought back the classic shadow-based stealth that old school fans had been missing for years. And then we had Yasuke, a historical samurai who delivered the heavy bruiser-style RPG combat that has defined the modern era of the series. It sounded like the perfect compromise, but then we actually played it. And despite being set during one of the most highly requested periods in history, the setting never felt fully utilized. The world often felt hollow, but the real tragedy was the narrative. The main story was incredibly lame. It felt weak, disjointed, and completely failed to capitalize on the immense political intrigue and social upheaval that defined feudal Japan. A setting filled with warring clans, shifting alliances, betrayals, and power struggles should have been impossible to make boring. Yet somehow the game rarely tapped into the full potential of its own story. But this is where it goes from being a disappointment to a genuine moment of shame for Ubisoft. The main story didn't even have a proper conclusion in the base game. To actually see how it ended, you had to play the Black Tides DLC. Now the Claws of Hawaii was still somewhat good, but the Black Tides one was perfect. It delivered a narrative that was far more compelling, focused, and emotionally resonant than anything found in the massive full-priced game that came before it. That is an embarrassment. A free add-on had to step in and salvage the ending of what was supposed to be one of Ubisoft's biggest flagship releases. And it speaks volumes about the state of the franchise when the most engaging storytelling in your long-awaited feudal Japan epic isn't found in the main campaign, but instead in a downloadable afterthought designed to tie up loose ends that never should have been left hanging in the first place. When we talk about the most unique premises in the entire franchise, Rogue is almost always at the top of the list. Flipping the traditional narrative and letting us play as Shay Patrick Cormac, an assassin turned Templar, was a stroke of genius. In the setting, it was a brilliant evolution of a formula we already loved. Taking place right before and during the events of Assassin's Creed 3, the developers took the widely acclaimed naval combat from the Caribbean and dropped it straight into the freezing, treacherous waters of the North Atlantic. Mechanically, it was a fantastic shift. Aboard the Morgan, we were not just dealing with enemy ships anymore, we were navigating massive icebergs, utilizing early puckle guns, and for the first time ever, we were the ones being hunted and boarded by assassins. It was a genuinely unique evolution of the ship warfare we had already mastered in Black Flag, and the setting itself, I didn't mind it at all. It was cold, brutal, and incredibly atmospheric. But the real issue, and the reason this setting feels like such a missed opportunity, was the narrative execution. Because the game was developed under an extremely tight schedule, the pacing suffered badly. Shay's transformation from a loyal assassin to a committed Templar happened right in front of our eyes and we didn't even realize it, leaving us with a story that felt noticeably undercooked where it should have been one of the most emotionally complex narratives in the entire series, questioning us which side was actually right. And worse yet, the game never fully explored the downfall of the Colonial Brotherhood. This was a massive and turbulent period in the Assassin's Creed history. It was a perfect opportunity to dive deep into the Brotherhood's collapse and show us exactly how the Templars did it. All the pieces were already on the board. They had the opportunity to weave the story directly into the wider Assassin's Creed lore and create the ultimate bridge between Black Flag, Assassin's Creed 3, and Unity. And while it technically did connect those games, the rushed narrative meant those connections never landed with the impact they deserved. So in the end, Rogue remains a game built on a fantastic premises, a unique setting, and some genuinely brilliant mechanics. But it's also a reminder of what could have been a great setting held back by a story that simply never had enough time to breathe. When you think about periods of history that perfectly align with the core themes of Assassin's Creed, the Abbasid Caliphate during the Islamic Golden Age sits right at the top of the list. It was an era of unprecedented scientific, cultural, and political advancement. And to give credit where it's due, Assassin's Creed Mirage delivered a masterfully crafted version of 9th century Baghdad. The city was dense, beautifully realized, and practically built from the ground up to support the return of classic parkour and stealth. The concept was incredibly solid, and the world itself was a joy to explore. But despite having such a rich and historically significant backdrop set around 861 AD, the game almost completely sidelined the era that made the setting so fascinating in the first place. Instead of diving into the complex politics of the Abbasid Caliphate, the turmoil of the anarchy at Samarra, or the broader significance of the Islamic Golden Age, the narrative pushed most of that into the background. Instead of exploring those forces shaping one of history's greatest centers of knowledge and power, the game entirely focused on Basim's internal struggles and his inevitable Isu reincarnation arc. Now that's perfectly fine. Now there's nothing wrong with that. But when your setting is one of the most intellectually and politically influential periods in human history, it feels like a missed opportunity not to weave those events more deeply into the main plot. As a result, the politics, intrigue, and historical significance of the era ended up feeling heavily underutilized, leaving Baghdad as little more than a beautiful stage for a prequel story whose ending we already knew. But the narrative focus wasn't the only thing holding the game back. The fact that Mirage was built on the backbone of Valhalla's RPG framework significantly limited its cinematic potential. And because the project originally began as an expansion before evolving into a standalone release, many of its cutscenes relied on the engine's standard animation systems rather than fully motion captured performances. And that limitation shows. In a game so heavily focused on personal character moments and internal conflict, those rigid animations often stripped scenes of the emotional weight they were clearly aiming for. And that's exactly why the setting ultimately feels wasted. The foundation was absolutely there, the city itself was a masterclass, it just needed a little more ambition, a stronger, more historically grounded narrative, and a cinematic presentation capable of matching the beauty and authenticity of the world Ubisoft had created. Instead, they had a golden opportunity, built a gorgeous playground, and simply did not push either the story or the technology far enough to finally do it justice. And that's it for today's video. We hope you guys loved it, and if you really did, then make sure to let us know in the comment section below. Subscribe for more content like this one, and I'll see you in the next one. Till then, goodbye.